Hi, my name is Mason Blake, and I'm going to be talking about the oppression in the New Deal of vulnerable populations. First, we have women, and while they achieved suffrage, that did not lead to immediate policy change, but it did lead to Eleanor Roosevelt as an advocate for women during the New Deal era. They made strides in terms of economic and social gain, but were still oppressed. Birth control still illegal in some states, and men were given job priority. And when women did have the opportunity for jobs, it was unequal pay for the same jobs as males. Next, we have Latinos. There were no labor laws in their farm work that were covered for them. They were very mistreated, no collective bargaining rights, and red baiting. They also did not receive Social Security or unemployment benefits. When requested welfare aid, they were deported to Mexico. Over 400,000 Latinos were forced to leave between 1929 and 1934. As the New Deal began, discrimination against African Americans continued unabated in both the North and South. Jim Crow laws were still enforced during this time, which meant African Americans were still disenfranchised and forced to live in segregated neighborhoods, sit at back of buses, and use separate bathroom facilities as well, and enroll their children in separate schools. There was more racism due to whites being afraid that African Americans would also take their jobs, which also meant that African Americans were likely to get laid off first. African Americans received higher wages from WPA than in field work in the South, though, because 15% of WPA workers were African Americans, but this led to whites being worried about the political and economic structure. Lastly, we have Asian Americans who were denied citizenship and access to relief programs during the New Deal era. They were prevented from working in many occupations and professions. They had to be in internment camps during World War II as well, where they received very, very harsh punishments and hatred. Many Americans feared that Japanese Americans would conspire with Japanese agents because of the immediate fear due to the Pearl Harbor attack in 1941. So that meant that Asian Americans were isolated and subjected to hatred and violence.